Okay, let's see. Is this on? Okay, cool. Let's see if I can do this myself for a change. Fantasy the Odd Incubus. Item number. Pending. Anomaly class. Archon. Special containment procedures. This entity referring to himself as Fantasy the Odd Incubus is, under no circumstances, to be contained by the order of Redacted. Description. This SCP is not fully understood, and thus should be interacted with in caution. Fantasy the Odd Incubus seems to have traditional demonic weaknesses and trappings, easily contained using ancient demonic summoning rites. The Foundation has cataloged the following traits of the SCP. He, most often, takes the form of a pink-skinned humanoid demon, but, in tests, was observed to enter the dreams of several D-class subjects and, based upon their descriptions, Fantasy approached them offering deals, often under the guise of a handsome male, often manipulating their dreams to encourage, bolster, or help rally someone who is lonely or struggling. The D-class subjects denied the offer Fantasy gave them, so details in the deed were never achieved. After several such tests... Wait, is he coming? No, okay. We're good. Let's see if I can try this again. After several such tests, interaction with Fantasy were forbidden. Upon hearing this, the entity got a mildly shocked look on his face, and shook his head sorrowfully. The SCP would often, from then on, lament to himself about the labor before him, and mention how lucky he was that time and space were subjective things. These suggested to the Foundation the entity at least believes himself capable of temporal or spatial transport. Addendum. SCP has escaped containment. From now on, all exposed to SCP Fantasy the Odd Incubus should be catalogued as SCP Sugar Plum. Fantasy escaped according to Foundation security footage, using one D-class subject previously exposed to Fantasy, with the assistance of other SCP Sugar Plum entries, managed to undo the containment holding Fantasy. The entity looked up, smiled, gave him a hug while wishing him well, then stepped out of containment. The following audio was heard from the entity before he vanished. Now, to find a mortal on this world to help me save theirs and my own. The following was recorded when this SCP was asked his goals and motivations. Imagine, if you will, waking up from an unimaginable, seemingly unending nightmare. Imagine if it was one of your own creation. Or rather, maybe one of you. Imagine waking with knowledge of the end. Imagine not only having this knowledge, but the millions upon millions of things you attempted to avert said destruction, knowing it would only be the start of a reality-rending engine of destruction swath against the multiverse. Imagine you had one last hope to avert it. Would you do what it took to reach for that hope? My little sugar plum.
And just pray tell, what are you recording just now?
Oh, just a bit of fan fiction. Don't worry, we're good.